All right. I got my wire all tied up. It was all connected to something. I got a robot here, and it's connected to my robot. Okay. Hold on. Is Barbie here? Barbie. Like I said to you a little bit ago, Barbie, you're more than welcome to invite them to the room. I'll let them get on the mic, and they can explain themselves. And then I'll set them straight. Okay, but I'll give you a little brief summary here of why obviously that's not correct. Elvis, guys, I've said this over and over, and you guys don't need to be told this, you know this. Elvis grew up very broke and poor in Tupelo, Mississippi. I went over it. I'm not going to go over the history of Elvis in Tupelo, Mississippi. He was broke. He was poor. He was, people would consider him back then, unfortunately, but they would say it, white trash. Never amount to nothing, which is total bullshit, as we know. But that's how they would say it, And so Elvis grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi. I don't know if you guys have been to Tupelo, Mississippi, or if you've been to Mississippi, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and so forth, and up to today. There are a lot of black people in Mississippi. And for certain reasons, So Elvis grew up around a lot of black people, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Because there's nothing wrong with black people. They're perfectly fine. We're talking about racism and the fact that people are out there claiming Elvis is racist or was racist, and it's totally ludicrous. Okay, we're talking about a person who grew up in a community surrounded by black people, surrounded by blues music, surrounded by that type of atmosphere. Believe me when I tell you, he not only was not racist, he embraced it. He was friends with all of the people around him. Okay, when he got famous, okay, who did he hire to be his backup group? Did he hire an all-white group to be his backup group? No, he hired the Sweet Inspirations to be his backup group when he went in Vegas. When he was in Vegas, who did he seek out to talk to? And you can hear him joke sometimes when the Sweet Inspirations are getting a little cocky on stage and they're making jokes and you're jabbing Elvis, You can hear him say, "Honey, you quit it, or I'm gonna get the Supremes and Diana Ross, or I'm gonna get Mahalia Jackson, and then they're gonna replace you." He would say it all the time. He would joke around about Mahalia Jackson. Elvis met Mahalia Jackson. He went out of his way to meet Mahalia Jackson. He looked up to her, okay? Elvis looked up to people like Mahalia Jackson. He got the sweetest. See, Elvis didn't just kind of fall into, here's his backup group, here's the Stamps Quartet, here's the Sweet Inspirations, here's Joe Gershio and his orchestra. He handpicked these people, okay? He knew J.D. when he was younger, okay? He went out and picked J.D. to be in his group. Charlie Hodge he met before he was in the military, okay? He picked Charlie Hodge to be in his group. He handpicked everybody that was in his group for certain reasons, why he liked them. Okay, he picked the Sweet Inspirations. Sissy Houston was in the Sweet Inspirations. Okay, and I'm going to get back to Sissy Houston in a second. I wanted to mention something in the room that I haven't mentioned up till now, but I'm going to. Elvis went out of his way to see Sammy Davis Jr. He went out of his way to talk to Sammy Davis Jr., to see his shows, and to be a part of his, Vegas experience. Elvis was there. He was watching him. One of Elvis's favorite, I want you to look this up, guys, because nobody mentions this lady. We all know that Elvis liked Tom Jones. He liked Jake Hess. He liked Mario Lanza. These are some of Elvis's favorite people. Dean Martin. He did like Dean Martin. Okay. He liked a lady named Rosetta Tharpe. She was called Rosetta Tharpe. Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Say that 3 times fast. She did gospel music. He loved her songs. I want you to look her up. And I want you to look up the original singer of Hound Dog. There's a reason he wanted to do Hound Dog. Because he wanted to do Mrs. Thornton's song. Because he had listened to it as a child. He listened to it as a young adult. He knew gospel. He knew rhythm. He knew blues. He knew all that stuff. Because he wasn't racist. He embraced what they were, what they brought to music. He embraced it. Okay? See, the problem today is there's goofs out there like Kanye West, you know, that are going around saying that rap is the new rock and roll and he is the top of the hill. Yeah, he's top of something. He's the top asshole. That's what Kanye West is. And if Kanye West was in my room right now, I'd kick him right in his groin, okay, because he's a douchebag. Okay, he has no business being in music. I don't know why people tolerate him. If I ever see Kanye West, I'm going to sock him right in his face. He is the biggest douchebag in music, Kanye West. There is nothing redeeming about that guy. Because he completely flips off what is right about music. He is the kind of people that are out there right now saying that Elvis was racist. And they are the kind of people that are saying it because they are jealous of Elvis Presley. That's what it comes down to. Anybody that says Elvis is racist, it has nothing to do with fact. It has nothing to do with reality. It has only to do with jealousy. See, back when Elvis became famous, I'm gonna set you straight on one thing. Here's what was going on. Music was people standing in front of a mic singing, you know, the Bing Crosbys, you know, of the world were standing in front of a mic, and they were singing, and they didn't move. They were singing nice songs to the middle-aged or older public. White America. Okay? But the young people of America, the youth of America, was just wanting to hear something new, something edgy, something different. And there was this culture out there of this thing that was sort of like, but not yet named, but going to be named, rock and roll. And it was coming up. And it was coined in Cleveland, Ohio, rock and roll. And they called it rock and roll. And there were people out there that were doing rock and roll. And there were some white people doing rock and roll. And there was a lot of black people doing rock and roll. You know, there was people like Little Richard out there. There was people that were coming up like Chuck Berry, who was a great guitarist doing rock and roll. But what they needed to make white America love it, to make white America accept it, because they weren't listening to it, because most white America was staunch, middle-aged, or older white people. And they weren't going to listen to black music. Let's be truthful here. They're not going to listen to that stuff because, let's face it, America in the 50s, I'm sorry to say, was racist. Okay? The greatest generation in the world, not so much. Pretty racist. Sorry to tell you. Okay? They hadn't quite opened up their eyes to the reality that there were more people out there than just white people. And there was more music out there than just white music. And they were looking for someone who was white, that sounded black, that could bring white and black together. So here is Elvis Presley, this young, good-looking guy who grew up in a black community around black people, around blues music, around country music, around gospel music, and he brought it all together. And you know, there's a lot of people out there who say, one of them is Little Richard, who says, you know, I'm the king of rock and roll. I should have been the king of rock and roll. I was doing that kind of music when Elvis was doing it. Why wasn't I the king of rock and roll? I'll tell you why, Little Richard, you weren't the king of rock and roll. Because you sang rock and roll music. You did not bring country, you did not bring gospel, you did not bring rhythm and blues into it. You strictly were one-sided. You sang one type of music. You weren't a well-rounded person who could fit the bill. Elvis was a good-looking guy who was white, who sang rock and roll music, who sang gospel, country, blues, brought it all together, danced, moved, made it rock and roll. He was the full package. Okay, so we all know that Elvis was probably one of the most generous people you'll ever meet. We also know that Elvis was one of the most well-rounded people you'll ever meet because he was like a sponge. He sucked up all of the music that was around him and all of the people that was around him. Okay? And that's why I laugh my ass off when people make that stupid statement that Elvis was racist. It is so ludicrous to me that anybody would think that Elvis, Aaron Presley, was racist. I'm sorry to tell you, but they're a complete frickin' moron if they think that. Okay? There's no other way to say it. Because if he was, why would he have hired the Sweet Inspirations? Why would he have went and seen Sammy Davis Jr., been friends with Sammy? Why would he have sought out Mahalia Jackson to talk to her, to, you know, just sit down with her? There's pictures of Elvis just sitting with Mahalia Jackson, just talking to her. Why? Why would you do that? Come on. If a person is racist, they're not going to even go out of their way to talk to these people. Okay? So there's no truth to it whatsoever. None at all. But before I get on to what I'm going to do, I wanted to say something. Sissy Houston was a part of the Sweet Inspirations, Elvis's backup group. She was one of the young ladies that sang backup for Elvis. Her daughter was Whitney Houston, who you all know, who passed away a couple years ago, unfortunately. Her daughter is Bobby Christina, who unfortunately was found in a bathtub the same way that Whitney was, and she's in the hospital right now. So I wanted to say something to the room and to all Elvis fans out there, because all Elvis fans are Sweet Inspiration fans, because Elvis was a Sweet Inspiration fan. He loved them. I want everybody in the room to pray for Bobby Christina, that hopefully she will make a recovery. But if nothing else, give all your prayers to her that she will be, or in some way find a way to come through this. Or at least if she doesn't, the family will know that people care. The bottom line. But I'm actually highly sad about this because, Sissy Houston's granddaughter. Guys, it's her granddaughter. She lost her daughter, and her granddaughter she might lose within a couple years of each other. This is crazy. And this is part of the Elvis world. So remember that. Have her in your prayers. She's one of your prayers, guys, please. A year. Wow. A year. Jeez. I was thinking a couple of years, but it was a year. Whitney Houston died 3 days to a year. Wow. That's crazy. That's so sad. And I will say this. People ask sometimes, did Whitney Houston ever meet Elvis? That's a question you see, but I don't nobody's ever answered it, so I want to answer it for you. Did Whitney Houston ever meet Elvis? And the answer is yes, she did. She was a young girl. She met Elvis Presley. She did. So, I just wanted to say that, guys. You know, it really upsets me when I have people, you know, it's mostly, like I've always said, it's mostly urban legends. When you hear stuff that isn't true about Elvis Presley, I can guarantee you almost every single time it is an urban legend that was written by somebody who had no clue what they were talking about. You know, just hate thrown and spewed out there with no sense of reality. You know, Elvis was the furthest thing from racist that you will ever find. Now, let me make something clear to you. You know, people got to remember something. That there was a lot of terminology in the 50s and 60s and 70s. You know, Elvis was, that's pretty much, you know, the time period that he was a grown man, 50s, 60s, 70s. And in that time period, there was certain language that was said, there were certain words that were said that, you know, now would be perceived as racist, but back then was perceived as just normal talk. So maybe in a closed room with a group of friends, you know, you might have said a word or this word or that word, and it might be construed today as a kind of a racist slur, but back then they were ignorant to the fact that it was racist. They didn't realize it. You know, it's not your fault if you were brought up in a culture of stupidity. Okay, and back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, people said things and did things that seemed normal to them because, you know, they grew up with it. They were around it. You know, my dad used to call a certain nut that you could eat, you know, not a walnut, but it was a certain nut you could eat, and he used a terminology to call that nut something. And I'm not going to repeat what it was, but, you know, as a kid, I called him that. But as an adult, now looking back on it, I go, man, that was so racist. No wonder. Geez, you can't call Rick and Nut that. What were you thinking? But see, my dad grew up in the South. And that was just a term they used to describe this certain nut. And it's crazy to think now that people would just say that, you know. It was just accepted. But think about society then versus now, you know, and the fact, like I said, Elvis made sure that he respected everybody around him. He loved everybody around him, and he was generous. And like I said, why? Last thing I'm going to say about this, and I'm going to leave it at this. You've probably met in your life people who are racist. I mean, true racist people. You know, the kind that go to Kmart to buy the white sheet cell. You know, those kind of people. Those goofballs, those idiots don't know nothing. You guys call me the wizard, but they're a different kind of wizard because they're ignorant effing morons. Okay, those kind of people. Okay. Do you think those kind of people would ever associate or seek out or hire Mahalia Jackson? Would seek out Mahalia Jackson just to talk to her, just to talk to her, to find out what she thinks about music, to just get a little bit of info from her? Or the Sweet Inspirations, hire them to be your backup group when there's so many white groups that could be your backup group. Or to talk to Sammy Davis Jr., to see his shows, to sit in the front, to watch his show. Or to be one of your favorite singers, to be Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who sings gospel music. There's so many examples, guys. of friends of Elvis. I could go on for hours mentioning black entertainers that Elvis was friends with, that he went to their show. Guys, why would he waste his time or effort listening to them, going to their show, talking to them? Why? That's just ludicrous. So, please, don't listen to these people. Barbie, do me a favor. Ignore those people. So like I said, just ignore those people. Do me a favor. Please pray for Bobby, Christina, Sissy Houston's granddaughter. Are you saying that, how long has it been since she passed Whitney? Are you saying you're correcting what you said? 3 years. I thought it was a couple years. 3 years, couple years. Yeah, same time period, couple years, yeah. Yeah, and found in the same way, too. Thank you guys for listening. I do appreciate it. Sometimes I get on my soapbox and I talk, but there's certain things that just irritate the hell out of me about people when they don't educate themselves on the truth about Elvis, and they just talk out their ass. And there's a word out there, it's called ignorant. Now that doesn't mean you're stupid. Ignorant doesn't mean you're stupid. Ignorant means you have a lack of knowledge, is what it means. You have a lack of knowledge. Ignorant is a lack of knowledge. So ignorant is a lack of knowledge. That's what these people have. I don't hate on these people. I don't hate people. I don't hate anybody. But I dislike people who have a lack of knowledge through the fact that they have ignorance. And they don't care to learn. That's the problem. Being ignorant is just something you are. But if you don't care to learn, that's what the problem is.